There we go. The doors are open.
Wait, are we starting? I just have to pick my nose a little bit.
The crowd is
go
rushing
get
in,
that-
rushing in.
The nose
Look at
taken care
that.
of.
Scalpers are selling these tickets for big bucks out front.
I know.
Coming in.
Out
Doors are
front.
coming in. Anyway, we've got plenty of seating here. Just
Hi, everyone.
just-
Welcome.
take your distance.
Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Oh, yeah, I
afternoon.
forgot. You're out west somewhere.
Good morning and good afternoon.
This guy is
And good
still thinks he's in Mountain Time Zone.
I am
Yeah.
in Mountain Time Zone.
Well,
As
good
people
morning.
trickle in, welcome.
Good morning, Kate.
Hey, Kate just says hello to everyone. And as you are coming in, this is a reminder, we'd like to tell everyone, if you are sending a comment, please, it defaults to only all panelists, but make sure you send it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can
Kate just
appreciate
did.
your wisdom.
Like
So-
we just did.
Yes, there we go. Woohoo.
Hi, Lisa.
Bob's
Hi,
here.
Kerr.
Trickle in. Isn't there a flood? Yes, they are
Yes.
flooding in now, Bob. Thank
Exactly.
you.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll get going in a minute-ish. Actually, let's have fun. In the meantime, if you're here and you want to type something in the chat box, type in, of the 4 esteemed panelists, what famous people do they look like?
Me. Oh.
No, I said famous.
Can we-
Sorry.
Can we
Oh.
play, Sanjay? Are we allowed?
Absolutely, you can. Who looks like what famous person?
This
think
is
you look
dangerous.
like-
I'm not going to like the answers.
Don't you? What's his
Yeah,
last
there you
name?
go,
Is his
Sunjay.
name
I
Dev?
get Ross from Friends all the time. Yeah, I also get Steve Carell and Ray Romano, depending on how old you are. And
I was thinking Dev, the guy that was in.
Dev Patel,
Yeah, Dev Patel. Yeah.
Lion from Lion.
Yeah.
If you've seen that movie, it's a fantastic movie. But
Who do you get, Richard?
I get Rick Astley.
oh,
Yes,
good
I
for
don't know who that
you!
is.
Never going to give you up, my friend.
That's why you never let us down, buddy.
That's right. That's right.
I get
I
Steve
used,
Martin.
I used to get.
Steve Martin, yeah.
No, I used to get. What was his name? He was the storekeeper on the Waltons. And I think when I was younger, I did look like him. I
Yeah,
got
before my time. Sorry.
You're much
I-
older than all of us, so.
not that much. I Godsey.
All right, quit your tomfoolery. Let's get this show going here.
All right, we got.
Welcome to everyone. Welcome to another rocking rendition of Every Other Wednesday. I get to play host. My name is Sunjay. I am from Oakville, Ontario, just outside of Toronto. And we will get our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. To my left, and I have no idea where they are on your screen, is Michael Kerr. Michael Kerr, say hello and say where you're from.
Hello, everybody. Michael Kerr here. I'm from Canmore, Alberta, in the beautiful Canadian Rockies.
Excellent. Below him on my screen is Mr. Jeff Tobe.
Michael Kerr, did I hear you have a new book?
I do. It's coming out shortly. We have the cover and everything. The Jerk-Free Workplace. Thanks for that, Jeff.
You can pay me later. Jeff
I
Tobe, from Coloring Outside the Lines, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but originally from Fergus, Ontario, Canada.
Woohoo.
Ooh, and last but certainly not least, Mr. Richard Hadden. Say hello.
Hi, I'm Richard Hadden, and I am here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live. And I have just been voted by my esteemed colleagues here as the member of the Culture Club most likely to be joining this call from a different location. And today I'm in a hotel because we have no internet at my house.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, one day, America will catch up to the rest of the world and get internet, in residential areas as well. So,
Yeah.
By the way, can I
Hello.
just mention that the Steelers are playing the Jaguars this weekend? So, Richard, we are mortal enemies right now.
No, we're not, because I
loser
know what's
buys
gonna
lunch.
I
Loser
know
buys
what's going to
lunch.
happen.
Richard starts saving up. So as you know, we gather every other Wednesday and we talk about cultural issues within organizations. And because we are so technically savvy, check this out. This week, we will be discussing, I want a rocking culture, but my boss doesn't care.
Went all
How
out
does
on
he
those
have-
graphics, huh, Sanjay?
Say that again.
I love the cadence of that.
Yeah, it went
It
all
just
out.
sounds like a song.
Went all out on those
I want a
graphics.
rocky culture, but my boss doesn't care.
Listen, Richard has asked me where I get the graphical design done, and if you text me privately later, I will get you some of that information. But let's talk about this this fun thing. We're going to cover basically 4 points on this, and they're actually really simple. But we're going to share some stories, some examples, and kind of try to bring it to life to hopefully it internalizes it, and you guys will walk away here with some specific nuggets of things that you can do to actually to improve the workplace culture if you don't feel like you're getting the support from the higher ups. And so the first point, drum roll please, Thank you, thank you, thank you. The first point actually is this: is the boss does actually care. Comment on that, Richard. You start us off.
Well, I mean, I think the boss cares about something. And so I think maybe part of what you may be going to talk about later also is, it depends on how do you define what it is that the boss wants and what you want. I think clearly the boss does care. The boss wants the business to do well. I think maybe the boss needs some education, and the boss just doesn't understand that there's a huge connection between culture and success.
Excellent. Mike, jump in.
Well, what do you mean, Sunjay? Do you mean the boss cares, but he's not doing anything about it?
Well, and I guess that's the thing, is the frustration. And when the whole topic was, I want to do this, but I'm not getting love from the higher up. So what do I do? So that is probably the first question. Is it's all around this whole notion of perception. What does the boss care? And to Richard's point, yeah, the boss freaking absolutely totally cares. But the frustration isn't that the boss doesn't care. The frustration is the boss doesn't care what I care about, and therefore I think the boss doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
Go
ahead, Jeff.
Let me take a step back if I can. Maybe it'll help everybody. I wrote a blog that was basically, how do you know when your boss cares? So I think it's very appropriate. And can I just quickly list the things I put in there? One, I think your boss cares when it sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But it's not. Your boss cares when they encourage your personal development as much as your professional development. So it's not just about sending you for training. It's also they are truly concerned about how you grow. The second thing is they don't sort of tiptoe around your weaknesses. I think I put it, no one wants to be told they suck at something, but a boss who's kind of skirts around the issue or makes believe you're making progress in areas you aren't just isn't helpful. The third is they're supportive if and when you decide to leave. That's a good way to tell. Maybe too late, but they're supportive. The next is that they make you feel a valuable member of a team. So even if you're new, you feel right away that you're part of a team. They take the time to learn about you and kind of your quirks, your desires, what makes you happy. And believe it or not, the last thing research shows is they say thank you. I know it sounds pretty trite, but they say thank you. And so those are just some things I wanted to get out to show your boss cares. So now we can backtrack.
But yeah, Jeff, that's a great list. And to sort of encapsulate all that, I know there's several studies that show that one of the top indicators of future performance in a team or a company is just how well a boss actively demonstrates that he or she cares about their employees as individual real humans beyond their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask this question though, Sunjay, because maybe I misunderstood the question when you first mentioned that this was what the topic was going to be, and we did this about 2 weeks ago, talked about it. I thought you meant I want a rockin' culture, but my boss doesn't care about the culture. And now what I'm hearing is maybe I want a rockin' culture, but my boss doesn't care about me.
No, it's both. It's
okay.
To Michael's point, it's the demonstration. The fact that I hear that a lot as an excuse, right? People go, well, I really want I want to sing Kumbaya every day at lunch hour, and the boss doesn't support that. And the boss doesn't support that because they don't see the value or the link between singing Kumbaya and whatever their priority is. Yeah. And their priority might be bottom line, or their priority might be whatever. And I liken it to that of, if you have kids, right? My 12, almost 13-year-old crosses his arms and says, my dad doesn't want me to have a social life because he will not let me play Fortnite 18 hours a day. So obviously he doesn't care about me. And so I'm using obviously a very trivial, simple example, but sometimes people feel that way going, because I'm not getting supported in the form in which I want, therefore he or she doesn't care. And which kind of actually brings us to the second point that I really want.
Let me interrupt for 1 second and just say, Sandra, I want to read this because, and to reiterate what Sunjay said before, you may not have been here, but please, if you're going to post in the chat box, please make sure it's to all panelists and attendees, because the one that it refers to is all panelists. But Sandra said differing priorities could make a good thing look a bad thing when pitched at the wrong time. So anybody want to comment on that?
Oh, timing is often everything. Yeah. And so I think it takes some wisdom to know when the timing is right on those things, and to maybe put something off to a time when the timing is better.
That's somebody who's truly a leader, right? I mean, that they know the difference. So
Yeah.
All right, Sunjay.
Again, that this whole notion of perception comes so much into play, and positioning it in a way that's important to them, which I was trying to get to the second point here, which is this: is you need to learn the form in which the boss does care. We know that everyone cares about something. And so if you say the boss doesn't care, that's not a fair statement. The boss cares about looking good. The boss cares about making money. The boss cares about having their ego stroked. The boss cares about something. And if you're feeling a frustration going, oh, they don't care about me, well, that may be true. They may not care about you. They may not even care about the culture, but they care about something. And so if you can position and articulate in a way that you can express to the boss how he or she can get their win by getting your win, that is what they need. It's that lack of communication or that linking that can often be the trouble. I'll give you a quick example is I used to work for a guy, and I didn't have a ton of respect for him. And so we'll hypothetically, we won't pick on anyone here. So we'll just call him Jeff. So his name was Jeff, and he loved to have his ego stroked. He always wanted to be like the man. And so I learned very quickly, I worked with him for a bunch of years, and I learned very quickly that if I ever wanted to do an idea or implement something that I thought would be beneficial, if I went to him and said, hey, Jeff, can I do this? It was almost always a, nah, no, I don't think so. And he'd poke holes, and this is why it's not going to work. This is why it's not going to work. And so it took me maybe a year to figure out if I took the exact same idea and I just prefaced it with this one sentence, which was, hey, Jeff, remember that idea you had? And then I would pause and I would insert my idea here. I got 99% approval. Almost always, that's a great idea. Yeah, you go with that. Go for it, Sunjay. And so what I recognized was he wanted to have his ego stroked. It's not that he didn't care. He just cared in a different form, and it was clashing with the form in which I was trying to bring it. So what we need to be able to do is understand the form in which they care, and then kind of make that link.
But what about the employee who doesn't really care? I don't mean about that. I mean, they don't really care about adapting to their boss's needs. I think that it sort of falls on us as an employee, not on the boss, to do things that just, that make them care. Yeah. Do what you're going to say. Do what you're going to say. You do. Come to me with solutions versus, and I'm looking, I guess, from a leader's perspective, but come to me with solutions versus problems. Be a great team player, manage your own growth, kind of thing. So I think that the responsibility is on me, not on my boss.
I was doing some work with a software company, and the CEO used to have a fairly open door policy, and he really wanted to hear what was wrong and how can we improve things. But his rule was, you can come to me with any problem, but you got to come with solutions as well. Don't come to me and bitch. You can complain, but let's work towards a solution. When we were talking about this 2 weeks ago, Richard, you actually mentioned this notion, and I'm going to get you to dig further on it, which was even if the boss doesn't care, you can still care.
Yeah. And that came from, years ago, I used to do a lot of training around coaching skills, and inevitably in every group, and I worked with a lot of middle managers, and in every group, someone would say, yeah, but my boss doesn't coach. And well, maybe that's true. I don't know what you can do to make your boss coach, but it all comes under the notion of, do what you can control and don't worry about the things you can't control. And so if it comes to coaching or any other kind of leadership skill or something like that, I don't buy the cop out. I understand your boss doesn't coach, but you can coach. You can still be a great leader in your sphere. Even if you're not a manager, even if you're not a boss, you can create a great culture there. I mean, it's almost like someone saying, well, my parents were lousy. And so, mine were not. But if someone says my parents are lousy, that doesn't give them an excuse to be a lousy parent, does it? It may explain why it's more difficult for them, but they still have the obligation to do that. And it also reminds me a little bit, this is going way back a long number of years, but the movie Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, anybody remember that story?
Yeah.
he was Joe Clark, he was this high school principal in Paterson, New Jersey. He was trying to change the culture. He was trying to turn the culture around in that school. He did not have the support of his boss, which was, he had two bosses. He had the teachers union and he also had the school board. And he did not have the support of either of those two bodies. And yet he said, I'm going to control what's in my circle and I'm going to make that improvement here. And wow, he did. So that inspires me to say, you know, if you want to make a change in the culture, if you want to influence the culture, it's great if the people, I say above the ceiling tiles, you know, if your boss is on board with you, then that's an advantage for you. But hey, a lot of times people do things without the advantages. So do what you can.
Yeah.
Wayne said obtain critical mass by getting enough fellow employees to join your cause. Wayne, I think that's called a union.
Yeah, and then the boss is really going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Wayne. Thank you for that. Don't forget, everybody, you outnumber in almost every workplace. Frontline employees outnumber their bosses. You have a mass of people there, and you can step up and take that leadership role that these guys have been talking about. When you do talk to your boss, I think it's important to put yourself in their shoes, to consider all the stresses, what they are thinking about that sometimes as frontline employees we forget about, to look at things from their perspective, to sell the benefits relentlessly of improving the culture, because ultimately that's what they care about. And being careful, because a lot of time I found one of the reasons, and there's many, but one of the reasons bosses sometimes resist suggestions is it might mean more work for them. Right? So being careful how you frame it, that we're not necessarily talking about more work for you. In fact, Susan, this is going to make your life way easier. You're going to have less stress. You're going to have less conflict. You're going to be happier and partner with your boss. But I want to circle back to what everyone's been talking about, just taking the lead yourself. There's a fabulous story in the book Stepping Up by Dr. John Izzo. It's a great book. And he tells the story of from Sioux City, Iowa, Mercy Hospital, where they had a horrible culture, horrible morale. And so a frontline group of employees with no supervisory, no budget responsibility got together and they decided, hey, you know what, this is our responsibility to change this. If the culture sucks here, it's on us and we need to change it because we're going to benefit from it. So they got permission from the higher ups to meet, to form a culture committee, which they called the Respiriting Committee. And they met for over a year, sometimes, yes, on their own time, because they took it that seriously. And the bottom line is, though, they ended up totally transforming their culture in a substantial way. And it started from the bottom up because they took responsibility, stepped up and said, we got to do something about it. This is our hospital.
To a point Jeff was making earlier, which is this idea of, well, what happens if I don't want what the boss wants? And I think it's a very common thing. But we need to, again, change the perception, understand that everyone wants a place where they can go to work, enjoy it, be productive, create value, and be part of a team. People want that. They want it in different forms, and what it looks like in each person's mind and each person's vision is different. However, bottom line is all the same. And what happens is, again, we sometimes get obsessed with the particular form. We say, hold on a second. If it is to be successful culture, it must look like this. Going back to my silly example earlier, we must sing Kumbaya for 15 minutes every day at lunchtime. Otherwise, we don't have good culture. And so what we, again, have to understand is because we have personalities and multiple priorities and different value systems going on at any given time, in order sometimes to get what we want, we actually have to help people get what they want. And so going back to my example of Jeff the boss, Jeff the boss gave me what I wanted when I was able to articulate into a form in which he wanted, which was the ego stroke. So yeah, I mean, you know, we're constantly going through that. Okay, so and we're going to the next point, which is what I wanted to make was, what are some of the specific strategies? And what Michael was just alluding to is this idea of, we have critical mass. You know, very often it is, you know, the pyramid looks like this, where these are the front lines and these are the bosses, and not too often do we look like that. Mind you, some organizations are, where they have, you know, too many cooks spoiling the broth. But so what are some of the things we do? And where I would start with is this idea of, you know, look for small wins, right? What are the things that are working and how do we build on those? Because ultimately, that's where you're going to get your traction. And once you get enough people, you get that critical mass, you get to move forward. The example that comes to my mind is, and I want to say I've shared with this in the past, maybe months ago, but if I have, I apologize. And if you're first time on the call, then I've never said it before in my entire life. So I'm reminded of a school. It was a high school that I was doing work with like 20 years ago, and went into their student council office, and it was a hole, right? There was 5 people on student council in a school of 1,000 kids, and they didn't have a student council advisor, and they didn't have a budget, and they didn't have anything. And they were kind of chumming around the student council office going, how do we change the apathy in the school? And they had this idea, which was they were going to survey the students. And they asked a bunch of questions, and the questions were like, what do you like most about the school? What do you like least about school? They used a few kind of questions to kind of get a benchmark of where they were. And they gathered the stuff, and the overall feeling from the school was it was a cold place and people didn't feel welcome. That was kind of the overall overarching feeling, apathy in the school. Maybe you could relate to this within an organization that you're currently working for, but bottom line is they felt meh. And so they kind of sat around, 5 kids, and they had no budget, and they had no boss, and they had no resources. And they said, well, what can we do? And one was like a 9th grade kid, and he goes, well, I got an idea. He goes, how about we smile at people? And they're like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, what happens, I notice that whenever I smile at someone, they tend to smile back at me. And so someone went, all right, let's try it. So they actually said they were sitting and they met weekly with the student council, and they said, all right, between now and next week, you have to smile at 5 people and make note of who it was. And they were like, okay. So they came back and they all smiled at 5 people a week later. And so they said that was really easy. It was no exchange. So let's try 10. And they started keeping track of the 10 people. And so they just kind of kept on doing this. And as the year went through, they went look back at the end of the school year, and they did another survey. And here's the interesting thing. By the end of the school year, the student council had grown to like 25 kids. They had 2 advisors, and they were actually starting to run some events. And they did an exit survey, and the overarching feeling that came back from the school was it was a warm and friendly place. So, a bunch of kids with no budget, with no boss, with no structure, all they did was they went, what's working? How do we leverage that? And how do we grow that? And it was something as simple as a smile.
Yeah.
Nobody's smiling back. I don't understand. Okay. So, in Coloring Outside the Lines, my book, how's that for a plug? One of the things that I kind of researched was that of all things that can boost creativity, self-esteem, and team morale, the most important is making progress in meaningful work. So there's a bunch of pieces there to dissect, right? One is making progress. So every day, am I saying, did I contribute something? Did I make progress? Those are the small wins I think you're talking about. And the second piece is the meaningful work. and it needs to be meaningful for you first, I think, right? Not just, are you doing, charity work? Are you may be on an assembly line. That's okay too. Is it meaningful for you? So there's a bunch of pieces there, but I think, again, I'm dissecting what small wins mean. It's different for everybody.
Absolutely. Mike?
Sunjay.
Awkward silence.
What's shaking? How you doing? How's everyone doing?
Um,
Yeah, small wins is huge. And Jeff alluded to this. We know from so much research into even just happiness, right? That people report being happiest on those days when they make the most progress. And as Jeff said, they come up with better ideas on those days as well. So much is linked to that. And there's that's what we have to remember. There's a disproportional impact on celebrating those small wins. So even though sometimes it might feel awkward or weird to celebrate or recognize a small achievement at work, we know from the research that has a huge impact. And so it's important to make sure you are measuring those small wins, that you're celebrating them, that you create. And so many culture turnarounds that I've seen have happened, or at least been facilitated through some sort of scorecard where people can see, everybody can see the progress that is being made and track the progress. So you got to figure out what it is you're measuring, which can be tricky, but you've got to measure that and celebrate it and recognize it.
Ken, in one of his books, Ken Blanchard talked about this idea, and it's always resonated with me, which is catch your people doing something right. And to me, that's just another way of expressing small wins. And in everyday, day-to-day stuff, when I see my kids, well, don't get me wrong, I do yell at them for leaving their sweater on the floor. But at the same time, I try to just as much kind of say, hey, I appreciated you picking up your dishes and bringing them to the counter without me having to ask. And to me, that is what the small win is. The small win is, what is the overall organizational goal we're trying to look towards? And what are the actions, or what are the things that people are doing right now that are supporting that? And the more I can bring attention to those, the more likely other people are to do that as well. And again, creating this critical mass to move us forward. So,
and Sunjay, on that note, let's not forget, we're talking about a boss who's resisting culture change here in theory, right? So let's remember the importance of recognizing our bosses and thanking them and appreciating them for the small wins and saying, hey, thanks so much. I felt so supported for what you did in the meeting. That was awesome.
Yeah, Mike, recognizing their small wins as well. It works both ways. It's not just up to them. It's like not a parent-child relationship here. So we are peers. Even though you're my boss, I'm going to recognize your wins as well.
And again, keeps coming down to that link, that idea of the boss wants something. And if they're driven, if the CEO is driven by money, all right, and that's why people, that is often an argument against culture. Oh no, I don't want to waste money on that fluffy stuff. We're here very bottom line centric, and we need to have the metrics and all that kind of stuff. If you can explain to them and express in their language, but hold on a second, here's what the research shows. When you have a productive workforce, your absenteeism goes down. The job satisfaction goes up. Turnover is lower. We have less training costs because the turnover is lower. It actually improves the bottom line. So yeah, we're going to have to pay $100,000 to bring Richard in for 2 hours. But we're willing to do that because that $100,000 is an investment that's going to save us $2 million over the next 2 years. Right?
Richard's that cheap?
Yeah, I know.
I've had to reduce my fees in the
COVID.
Understandable.
I love what Stephen said in the chat. How many of you have ever sent your boss a thank you card? Not an email, but a card. And then Jeff, who's the smart aleck in the group, said, I work for myself.
That's
I
a
have all
great
kinds
idea.
of cards here. I send myself all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea when you've got that kind of relationship that you can thank your boss and do it in, with a handwritten thank you card.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what Gail said before. She talked about the radio station that we all listen to, WIIFM, right? And it basically about incentives. So do you think that the boss should be incentivizing their people to care to for this progress you're talking about, or is it self-incentivized? Is that a word?
I think that we all have our drivers. I do an exercise sometimes with audiences, and I give them a list of 5 things, and I go money, health, family, religion, and sports. And I say rank those 5 things from 1 to 5, 1 being the most important, 5 being the least. And as you know, I'm a numbers nerd. If you do that, there are 120 different combinations in which to do that. Okay. It's 5 factorial. Now, if I add in a 6th one, it goes up to 720 numbers, 720 combinations. The 7th one, we go up to nearly 5,000 different combinations. What I try to say is, at any given time, we have a list that's hundreds of items long, either things we're really for or things we're really against. But that list is what I call a value print. It's a print of your values. And the only truly predictable thing about human behavior is we act in accordance to our values. So whatever our number 1 value is, we tend to spend most time, energy, and resources in, and whatever is really, really low, we think is a waste of time. And so unless we can link, and sorry, hold on a second, and go back even further. Every time we have a conflict, anytime 2 human beings or 2 organizations or 2 countries or 2 sports teams have a conflict, it's for one of 2 reasons. Reason number 1, I'm expecting you to live according to my values, and number 1 should be your number 1 priority. Or number 2, you're expecting me to live in your priorities, and you think your number 1 should be my number 1. And so every conflict, whether we're arguing about where we should be squeezing the toothpaste in the middle or the end of the tube, or what we should be doing with our country's oil, has to do with one of those 2 things. how many people you're allowed to marry, what religious deity you should be following has to do with one of those two issues. So if we're having a conflict, it's really that simple. And usually how we can overcome most conflicts or most disagreements is helping people to express in their value print what's important to your value print. So rather than me pushing, money is a great one, because the reason why so many people value money is it's the most transferable one. It's easy to transfer money from one form to another. But if I get obsessed with always one particular form, I'm going to have more conflict. So again, with the boss, going back to that example of Jeff, my boss, I think is so powerful because I knew that ego stroke is what was so important to him. I could get him to infuse the tradition of singing Kumbaya every day at 12 o'clock. And here's the thing is, once you have the win, one of the most addictive virusy things is success. So if you can have the small win and go, look, I told you singing Kumbaya gets us to this and we're improving the bottom line, then people are more likely to jump on and follow along.
So Sunjay, I agree with what you're saying, and it raises an interesting point though, from a cultural point of view. We know strong cultures are created and driven when people adhere to a common set of values that they live out loud, that they don't treat as slogans or cheesy motivational posters, but lines in the sand, which means hiring for those values, firing for those values, keeping people accountable for those values. So you do have to create, if you're going to create a great team or organization, you have to talk about this. You have to translate what those values, what those suckers mean in terms of everyone's behaviors and attitudes. And you do have to make that expectation. No, this is one of our core values, buckwheat, and you're not living up to it. So we're going to find you a different place to work. And when it comes to this topic of talking to our bosses, that's another recommendation that I make to my audiences often is leverage your organization's values. Everyone has them. They're sitting on a coffee mug or poster somewhere. So pull those out and use them when you're talking to your boss. Say, you know, these values mean something to me, and I feel like we're in our team not living up to these values right now. And here's why I feel that. What do you think we could do to make sure these values actually do mean something?
Yeah. Love it. Just wait very quickly. Do you find that in dealing and doing consultations and stuff that you find a lot of employees are named buckwheat or no?
I do.
Okay.
Many employees are named buckwheat.
You know, I want to I step on that before it goes too far, but I know everybody can read it. And I don't want to repeat things, but I love what Yvette said. She said that she calls her boss to check in to ensure he's okay with all that's going on, because it's important they realize that they count too. And I think that's a great way to, that's the kumbaya that you're talking about, I think. So, and I want to ask Richard if he's ever heard Sunjay talk that much in one breath. But anyway.
Of course I have. We all have, haven't we?
Shut up, jerks. Richard, we haven't heard much from you. What say you on this? Anything to add, subtract, multiply, divide?
Well, I was thinking that if you can have the kind of conversation that Mike was just talking about with your boss, I think that is indicative of a pretty healthy culture. I mean, it's not perfect and it may not be fully developed, but if you can sit down with your boss and say the kinds of things that Mike was just talking about, I think the potential for a lot of healthy discussion is there.
Great. All right. And moving on to the last point, which I wanted to kind of beat a bit, which was this idea is constantly reevaluate and make corrections as you go. Just because, you know, you try something and it doesn't work, you don't necessarily need to be stubborn about it. Thoughts?
Oh, I think definitely if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that, we try things that we've never tried before. And if they work, we keep going with them. And if they don't, we don't. And I've seen, maybe not as much as would be great, but I've seen people extend a little bit more grace to people during this and say, okay, well, you tried that and it didn't work. But this is the first time we've ever been through a pandemic and tried to deal with everything that's going on. So I think if we can take that attitude, take that position that, yeah, let's try it. And if it works, then let's keep with it. And if not, let's give each other feedback, in a gracious and helpful way, and help each other learn whatever we're doing.
I believe a big lesson that's come through within the whole COVID thing, and it absolutely applies to culture, is that people are allowing people to be more human, especially with regards to home calls. If the dog or the cat walks across the camera on your desk, people don't think twice about it now. Or if the kid comes yelling and they're bleeding, it's more accepted that people are like, okay, we don't have to pretend like we're this superhuman professional that has nothing beyond us. It allows people to mess up and be real. And so I think that we come from an understanding that says, if you have a planned strategy, right? You have two strategies, there's planned and emergent. And we live in this world that thinks that if you plan the strategy and you execute it step by step accordingly, that makes you a genius. But that's garbage, because just as important is the emergent strategy. And by the way, people think the other thing too, which is if you have an emergent strategy, meaning you just make it up, fly by the seat of your pants, and that's fantastic, and you did that and you got away with it, amazing. But for some reason, we don't allow people to go back and forth. And that's usually where the most solid, most stable, robust plans come from, is you have this idea of, we're going to go down this path. And we start going down that path, and then, oh my goodness, COVID-19 hits. All right, detour. And that ability to change the detour, going, this is what I wanted to do. This is how I thought we were going to get there. But oops, I was wrong. It's not really working. How about we try this?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I took this, when you suggested this, I was thinking more internally. So I don't know, I guess it's about interpretation, right? This one was reevaluate and make corrections as you go. Isn't that what you just had up there? You can show us again. And so it reminded me of 4 questions I have up on my wall, have been there for years. And if I can share them quickly, I just, on a weekly basis, maybe sometimes daily, depending on how I'm feeling, I ask myself 4 questions. The first is this work I do meaningful? And if it's not, how can I make it more meaningful? The second is, what joy do I get after a week of work? And I want to be able to answer these, because if I can't, then I'm not doing what I should be doing. The third one is, am I upskilling? It's a term I heard years ago, and it just means that, am I personal development, making myself better? And the fourth one was, what role does work play in creating the life that I want? And so to me, that's constantly reevaluating and making corrections. But again, I took it internally, not as part of a culture. But I think if everybody did that internally, then the culture would be stronger.
Those are great questions, Jeff. And to circle back to the central topic of today, I take sort of Sunjay's last point to also remind us that if you're having a challenge communicating with your boss about the importance of culture, what we're talking about here, then try different strategies. If you're not getting anywhere using the proverbial hammer over and over, try a different tack, try a different approach, try different stories, different examples, offer to follow up, offer to try things on a trial run so that the boss sees that there's no risk here, or low risk, because you're going to reevaluate very quickly, and you will change course if this doesn't work, but give it a shot. And I noticed, I want to circle back to something the illustrious Kit Grant commented on way earlier in the chat box, that leadership has nothing to do with your job title or position or power. And that's a fundamental thing I talk about in my book, The Jerk-Free Workplace, but also what we're talking about here is, it's about, again, everybody stepping up with their character as a leader to demonstrate concern and how they contribute to the culture. And when you come, I think, with a leadership mindset to talk to your leader, your manager above you, they respect that big time. I know so many bosses who tell me, God, I so respect when I'm in the moment, I might be defensive, I might get my back up, I might get even a little pissed off. But once I've had a time to reflect, I always respect it when employees come to me and have a difficult conversation or challenge me with a difficult question or assumption, because it shows they care about the organization and it demonstrates that they're being leaders.
To both what you, Mike and Jeff said, this idea of how did I intend it? Yeah, I meant it more from the organizational standpoint, which is, hey, your boss doesn't care and you try a strategy and you don't get success, so change your approach. That's how I meant it. But just as valid is exactly what you're saying, Jeff, from an internal standpoint, and which goes to this point of the boss does care. You guys interpreted it different ways. The boss does care. And usually that's why they got to be the boss, because they do care. And they just, again, may not care about the things you care about, or they have a different political agenda or financial agenda that you're not necessarily privy to. And so they think they're doing the best they can. And I think sometimes we forget that as human beings, we don't actually make mistakes. Given the information we have at the time we make the decision, given everything we know, we do what we think is best in that moment. Now, often what happens when we look back, we go, oops, wish I'd known that. But in the moment, given all the resources we have, we always execute what we think is the best decision. So what we need to do is equip people with more information so they can make a better informed decision. And unless they got that information, they're going to stick with what they already know. And so that's why I'm trying to say that if it doesn't work, reevaluate it, offer more information so that they can see the different perspective. And maybe that doesn't change their minds. Maybe it still doesn't, but maybe they're more open to a new idea, new concept.
Maybe this goes back to another point you made, Sanjay, but I think that it's also seeing the world from your boss's perspective. It reminds me, in customer experience, we do a lot of work with NPS scores, net promoter scores. Bottom line is that you know what it is, everyone. It's just the question on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely not, 10 being absolutely, would you refer us to your, and one of the things that I tell my clients is that if you're getting an 8 from somebody, you don't want to ask them how you get to a 10. 8 might be their best. They may never give 9s and 10s. So that is their top score. And I think of the same thing about my boss. I got to know where his or her bar is set and what their expectations are of me as an employee. And then I can meet those expectations. Often though, a leader has higher expectations than we can even achieve. So that's even harder, but I just want to know where is that bar so I can try to reach it.
Does anybody, in terms of strategies, does anyone have any clients or know of examples where they do, what do they call it? Skip? You have no clients, Richard? Yeah,
no clients.
COVID sucks. It's just,
but when he does, they're $100,000 each an hour
for 2 hours.
Yeah, he only needs one, right?
He needs many.
Does anybody have any experience with what I think are called skip level meetings, where managers meet with the employees 2 levels down, which if you're a boss is a pretty scary thing, right? When your employees are meeting with your higher up to take the pulse and check what's going on. But in terms of strategies, that's a pretty darn good one, I think, in terms of keeping, if you have to build, I think, a culture of open and honest communication and trust for that to work effectively. But if you can do that, that's a pretty good way of keeping everybody honest.
Yeah. By the way, Karen says she has a meeting this afternoon, a CEO and coffee meeting this afternoon. Karen, I think all 4 of us are available. If you just want us to jump on that call with you, I'm sure we could really help your cause.
Yeah, a little bit of a sales meeting, but whatever. It's we're good.
Exactly. So
I like
wrap things up.
my coffee. We also have a comment from Rob who reminds us that it's, keep in mind that we all have bosses. So a CEO as a boss, the board of directors. And it was like, it's just like I was talking about with Lean On Me. The school board was Joe Clark's boss, and they didn't promote a good culture, but he still ended up with one.
Ultimately, saying what's been said, I'll say it in my language, was everyone's boss has this value print. And the more clearly we can understand the value print, meaning what is important to them or to him, her, or the organization, if it's a board of directors, the easier we are to help them to help us. So when we can explain, we can get you to your cause, but in order for us to do that, this is what we need in our cause. So we need this Rockin culture in order to be able to increase the bottom line. And here's the research, or here's the example, or here's the case study, or here is the pilot of how we're going to do that. All right, let's start wrapping this up. Final thoughts.
Oh, yeah. There you go, Mike. Frederick said that, Frederica says that he has skipped level meetings. And so there's an interesting observation there. He says, these are often perceived as gripe about my boss sessions by the employees. I could see that, you know.
I think the expectation should be set ahead of time. This is not what this is. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Final thoughts before I wrap up?
Yeah, final thoughts on I want a rocking culture, but my boss doesn't care. So give us something. Richard.
I think we have to make sure the boss understands the benefit of having a rockin' culture. And if that means to improve the culture in your own little area and see how performance, because if that's how the boss measures things is by performance, and that's a pretty good way to measure things. If they see that the culture is improving and that the performance is improving, I bet that boss is going to want to drag that throughout the rest of the organization.
Jeff.
I'm going to hold off and I'll wrap up.
All right, Michael.
Well, to add on to what Richard just said, I think that's critically important. But don't just throw numbers at them. Throw examples, throw stories, use stories of businesses around the world, especially in your industry, that are rocking it. I find stories work so effectively because people see, okay, there's actually companies doing this and it's working and they're getting phenomenal results.
And it creates an emotional connection. Using an example of something within the industry that said, hey, this is where we want to go. Show the example and make sure it ties into what's important to the boss.
Yeah.
Jeff, over to you to wrap it up.
Yep. Jeff.
Yeah, listen, I've got a bunch of stuff, so I'll talk quickly. But first of all, for those of you who are new with Every Other Wednesday, you can watch past episodes. I'm sure that's what you want to do on your coffee break. Hey, Karen, maybe you could get your boss to watch them. I don't watch them, your CEO. Anyway, you can go to eowednesday.com. They're all posted there. Can't forget about our retreat, guys. It's coming up quickly, and we did not plan this because it's on January 20th and 21st. January 20th might be a huge day here in the States. We think it's going to be a huge day here in the States, but we're not sure what's going to happen. So, but you can be with us instead and not worry about anything political. January 20th, 21st, details are on eowednesday.com. And just to wrap up, I am so excited about our next show, which is December the 2nd. Please, please, please mark it on your calendars. Make sure you're there. We have a special guest host. If you were with us,
invite other people, especially to this episode.
Yeah, if you were with us last time, we had a guest host. It was great. She was Camille Washington from FedEx. This time we've got Lenora Billings Harris. If you don't know Lenora, she is an award-winning authority as a diversity and inclusion researcher and author. She was picked as one of the top 100 global thought leaders in diversity and inclusion by SHRM, guys, Society of Human Resource Management. So make sure, mark your calendars, December 2nd. I can't wait. Back to you, Sunjay.
I want to say thank you, everyone, for spending the time, and we will see you every other Wednesday.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Next time.
Good luck, those of you married to a Scorpio.
Thanks.